We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. A little bit shorter this week. I'm the one with a heart out this week, so it's definitely going to be cut short by about 15 minutes. Sorry for that, but we'll try to hurry along as we go. But I do...
Somebody offered us $100 to do only an hour-long episode. Right. So
I was like, cutting an entire hour, that's definitely something is going to change if we did that.
We just do it twice.
Yeah. Twice a week. That's slightly more work for us, which is why we're not going to do it. So
that's right.
It's really not a huge.
You can press pause,
it's slightly.
We can double our workload.
That's
right. You can decide.
Oh, it's not quite double the workload, but regardless, no. it's a little bit more than
it
zero.
It is. Well, not for you, but for me, it is about double the workload because I have to re-edit together two different podcasts,
posting the show notes and all that.
All that stuff.
That's the stuff that if you don't do a weekly podcast, you're not aware of. Like, it is just tedium, just the writing of the show notes and copy pasting and formatting and all that stuff. It's like none of that is what I would call difficult, but it takes time. It has to be done,
and you get good at it.
Sure.
My wife's always like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm editing the podcast." She goes, "It sounds like you're watching YouTube." I'm like, "I am."
Sure.
But I am also editing the podcast because there's you have to press buttons and wait for things to happen. It's just the way this thing works, and then you have to know.
Anything that is non-zero is a little bit too much. So I didn't want to completely abandon talking about what we watched this week. I watched The Green Knight. That is from 2021. That's with Dev Patel.
I feel like I wanted to see that movie.
Yeah, It was interesting. I mean, it is an adaptation of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, a pretty famous tale from the Arthurian legends, a story unto itself based on a poem. So this definitely padded things out because it's over 2 hours taken from a poem that was nowhere near 2 hours worth of content.
It wasn't one of those epic poems, huh? Like the Gilgamesh stuff.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't the Iliad. So yeah, it certainly padded out. What they did was things that were briefly alluded to in the poem. They kind of ran with it and visualized it, but
sure,
a very a different take on it. Of course, everything with the Arthurian legends was all about chivalry. It was essentially parables about how to be a chivalrous person, with a lot of things that by today's standard would be considered quite, it's all very patriarchal and a bit misogynistic by today's standards. But that was everything was like parables about chivalry. Well, this adaptation of it, The Green Knight, turns quite a bit of that on its head, like supposing, okay, what if this were a real person and not a chivalrous knight from Arthurian legend? What if this is a person who is a little bit more believable? Like, maybe they're not quite as brave as the poem that was written about them makes them out to be, right? It sort of takes that approach with it, and sort of just runs all the way in that direction with it. So I enjoyed it. I found it interesting. I wasn't like over the moon about it. But yeah, it's kind of worth a watch. It is very dimly lit through almost all of it. It seems like they went for natural light. If it wasn't natural light, they were definitely trying to approximate natural light. So quite a bit of it is very, very dim. I was watching it in a streaming version that was not HDR. I suspect watching the disc version with HDR would be considerably superior. I'm sure there was a fair amount of shadow detail that I was just not pulling out of the stream that I watched it. So on a home theater front, I don't know for sure. I haven't seen the disc to compare, but my suspicion is that it might be a more visually pleasing experience on the disc in HDR. And on the audio side, there were actually a fair number of scenes that I think are some pretty good audio demos specifically for like Atmos panning. like sounds that are coming from all around you, because there are several scenes where he's sort of out in the forest, lost or disoriented, and they actually spin the camera around, and there's just the forest creature sounds that are going on, and they come out of each of your speakers in a pretty continuous circle. So so it's a pretty good demo in those scenes for that, if you're specifically looking for something where it's like, oh, am I going to notice the timbre match of my speakers in a full circling pannings type of sound like that. There's some pretty good demo in there. So the Green Knight, I give it a thumbs up. It's not a way up, but I give it a thumbs up. How about Tom?
I can't remember. Okay, so during my COVID quarantining, I watched a lot of stuff, and I keep forgetting some of the stuff I watched.
Which, by the way, how is everybody doing? I should have asked that
everybody's
first.
Fine. That's okay. My wife and I are both better. She has tested negative, as some of you may or may not know, for like months after having COVID. You can test positive.
Right.
You're no longer contagious. You're no longer symptomatic, but you'll continue to test positive.
Sure.
So far, I have not tested negative yet, but I am cleared by my I don't know, general physician or personal physician, or what. Personal physician sounds like I got somebody in the house, but the person who I go to said, and the CDC both agree that I'm no longer contagious and can be out in the public. But my wife has tested negative. She was surprised. She didn't think she would, because she still feels a little congested. I haven't felt anything for over a week.
Okay.
Now. Well, yeah, about a week now. So like last week when we were doing the podcast, I was coughing a little bit. That was the last of it.
Okay.
I haven't really felt anything, and even then, that was more a nuisance than feeling bad. So,
sure.
And the kids never got it, and I cannot explain it. I cannot explain it, because there's definitely my 12-year-old who will be 13 soon. He sticks to you like Velcro, and there's times when we were all wearing N95 masks. My wife was in the other room, and she was quarantining, and we were wearing the N95 masks. I was like, "Where's my mask?" And I'm looking around, and he's wearing it. I'm like, "Take that mask. That's my mask." So, and then I came down with it a couple days later. I'm like, "That kid's getting it." Like 1,000. He did not get it.
Huh.
I could not believe it.
Well,
so, everybody's. We tested them continuously. Everybody tested negative. So. It is what it is. So,
okay. Well, I mean, the main thing is that
fine.
Nobody was hospitalized in your family. Nobody got to that point, or even close to it from the sounds of it.
Very fortunate.
So that's good.
We feel very fortunate.
Good.
Yeah. So, my wife and I watched The Hating Game, which is I don't know. I think it may have been. It's one of those movies that's only released on a streaming service. So it was like they made the movie, then they tried to sell the movie, and no major studios picked it up, and here it was. And there's a reason, like when you see those movies, you're like, okay, I can see why this did not get a mainstream.
Bit like that Cloverfield paradox.
Oh God, that was a train wreck. I hated that like so much.
That was a direct-to-video if ever there ever was one.
If ever there ever could be a direct-to-video. All it was lacking was like the hand-drawn, oil painted cover that has like the guy that has nobody who's in the actual movie on the front of the thing. It's just the great covers, terrible movies.
But The Hating Game.
Hating Game, yes. It's a romantic comedy, and I thought that overall it was fine. It was fine. The writing is poor. The acting is okay. I mean, I think both the main characters did an okay job. They were believable. I kind of liked them. I was like, well, if they didn't have to say that, and they said maybe something else, this would have been a better scene. But it's not their fault. They didn't write it. So I felt like it was okay. But wasn't that great. We finished Ted Lasso.
Oh, okay.
For the second season of Ted Lasso, which people complained about getting too political, and there was at least one episode that was overtly political.
Well, I guess these days.
I don't really mind that, because I think that, sports recently have become very political, so
sure,
having that be in there isn't necessarily unrealistic. The fact that it was one episode, and the next episode they never talked about it again seemed less believable.
Weird, yeah.
But like there didn't seem to be any real fallout from it, except they got to wear different jerseys from that point forward. I'm like,
that was whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't even think of that as a particularly political thing, but all right, I guess it was.
Yeah,
Sure.
so I thought it was fine. It just wasn't as focused as the first season.
No,
The first season was very focused on Ted and
that's a show where the people who created it clearly had one season's worth of content in mind when they started, and then they're like, oh, we get to make a second season. We had some ideas, but not quite as fleshed out.
Yeah, and I finished Mythic Quest as well.
Oh, great.
That was fine. Clearly, they are not making any more of that. So I was like, they just were like, oh, we're done. I'm not doing this anymore.
I'm not sure. I heard somewhere in the back of my mind is something about Mythic Quest might get another season. Ted Lasso is supposed to get a third and final season. The third season is going to be the final season, supposedly.
Yeah. Haven't really watched anything else on Apple TV Plus or whatever.
Yeah,
since
you're getting it all
Ted
in there
Lasso.
before your trial period runs out.
Yeah, I've only watched one episode of Severance, or maybe
Severance,
two.
Foundation.
Oh man, I don't know if I can go back to Foundation. I'll be honest with you. I'm so disappointed in that series. But yeah, I mean, other than that, we haven't really
Dickinson.
been watching.
Have you checked out Dickinson? Might be worth it.
Obi-Wan really. Oh, I remember when I want to say Obi-Wan. I meant to say this last week, and it stands true after they released the third episode.
Okay.
The one thing I really, really, really like about Obi-Wan, more than anything, and he, of course, Ewan McGregor is awesome, and the little girl playing Leia is amazing. I love her. But the thing I really like about it is how, you always thought within the organization like the Empire, where it is clearly the people at the top are evil, like they are power hungry, evil people at the top. You're like, this cannot be the finely tuned, oiled machine that it looks like from the outside with all these stormtroopers in line doing their thing and everything else. And then you see the Inquisitors infighting, and I'm just like, that's exactly the way I think it would be. Just like constant jockeying for position, going around each other's backs to curry power from other people.
It totally makes sense within Star Wars canon, because you look at the Sith themselves, right? Their whole rule of two, and they're constantly replacing each other. So, I mean, and they are the ones at the very top, and that stuff you would expect to trickle down to everyone below them, that they're going to have that similar attitude. So, yes, that definitely
This is
fits.
the first time that we've really seen this within the Empire.
Yeah.
And I really love seeing it. I really love seeing it. I know there's a lot of, maybe not a lot, there are a vocal minority of people who are making a big stink about one of the actors on there, and I think they are completely off base.
Oh, that's ridiculous. That's I don't know where all that's coming
everything
from.
They're saying is as far as I can tell, and it's funny. It's like suddenly when they're trying to come up with some reason to be racist, they're like, "Oh, well, it's all about the story." I'm like, my dude, I am with you on this. I love Big Trouble in Little China too. All right, that is a dumb story that's not very well acted, but it is awesome. Okay, and everything about it is awesome. And even if you had a point that this is not as well acted as it could be, that this is, the vitriol is way overboard. And I think everybody in it is doing a great job so far. In fact, my least favorite character was, I don't know the actor's name or the character's name, but he was the fake Jedi. At the city.
Wasn't that Kumail Nanjiani?
Kumail, yeah, something or whatever.
Yeah.
And I like him. I do like him as an actor. I felt like
it's always a little bit weird when someone that recognizable is in Star Wars and they're not like covered up by CGI aliens.
Well, then Zach Braff was in the third episode, and I was like,
like...
I saw him. I saw his name pop up, and I was like, Zach Braff was in there?
He sounded like he was doing a Seth Rogen impersonation.
It was awesome. It was awesome. So, yes, I'm really loving, I think out of all the, and including The Mandalorian, and you can give me all the hate you want, I think this is by far the best Star Wars thing that has come from Disney Plus so far.
Yeah, it's very good. We'll see how it ends, because they've had weak endings so far on a lot of Disney Plus stuff. So
they have.
We'll see how it goes.
But I'm very much liking it, and I think the fact that we're actually seeing the inside of the Empire a little bit by having more than one bad guy, because usually it's just like the one. It's like Darth Vader coming for you with all the stormtroopers, and then it's Moff Gideon or whatever his name was coming after the Mandalorian with all of his stormtroopers. This being able to see that, I think, is an amazing thing. And if you're wanting to see the Green Knight in America, you can stream it, but you have to have Showtime.
Okay,
so there you go. I'm very much liking it, and I am so excited for Ms. Marvel coming out. I cannot tell you how excited I am.
By the time this podcast is out, the first episode should be out and available.
You can see I'm sorry, I hit my microphone. You can see in her interviews how excited she is to be playing the character. And I'm like, I am so excited for you to be playing this character because you seem like totally jacked for it. And I can't
very
imagine...
genuinely so. That's not a put on by her at all.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. That.
And I'm so excited to see it. And it's like, for my kids, especially my youngest son, it's another young hero for him to see and stuff like that. So I'm super excited for it. So expect next week for me to talk at length, ad nauseum about that. So,
okay.
But for right now, let's get to this podcast. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your question answered. All you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Go to avrant.com and you can see or listen to our old episodes, see our show notes from this podcast, as well as there's a Flickr page that has all the images that we'll be talking about. Those will be on the YouTube at youtube.com/avrant.
That's it. Stops there.
AVRant. That's right. But if you don't want to watch the YouTube, I don't blame you. I don't want to watch it either. But if you can, we'll follow through the pictures, so it makes it. I tried to describe them to you as best I can, but it's seeing them is better. You can contact Rob directly. Rob at avrant.com. His Twitter's at FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter's at avrant_Tom, which is extremely active Twitter. You probably don't. Yeah. I mean, if you don't want to get inundated by my stream of consciousness thoughts right off the dome piece, you might not want to follow me. Anyways, let's thank our listeners of the week. Become a listener of the week. You support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. I should have talked to you about this beforehand. Do you see that first name?
Yes, yeah.
So the name as it showed up on PayPal was the one that's in parens.
Gotcha.
But the name on the other side is when I clicked through it, because I didn't believe that was the person who did it. That was the name I saw. Okay. So do you recognize either of those two names? I
didn't pick up on anything in email that came from there, but Ryan, which is the name we're going to say.
We're going to go with Ryan.
There definitely was a Ryan who emailed us, just didn't mention anything particularly about the PayPal or what account it was coming from. So I think it's probably Ryan, yes.
So Ryan and Aras went to avrant.com, clicked on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and gave us a PayPal donation. We also have 139 patrons over at patreon.com. Patreon's a service. You can sign up to become a monthly contributing listener, where every month they'll take some money from you and give it to us. So we have 139 of those, including Martin. So thank you, Ryan and Aras, for our PayPal donations, and our 139 patrons, and including Martin.
Yes, indeed. That is Ryan and Aras. Thank you very much for the PayPal donations. One-time donations in the amount that you choose. You do not need a PayPal account. You can just use a credit card, so that's great. And patreon.com/AVRant podcast is the place to go to sign up for an automatic monthly donation. Select the amount, and every month it'll automatically come from you and be sent to us. So 139 patrons over there. Martin is one of them. Thank you all very much for the financial support.
So we got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going, even though I got the Rona through the Rona and everything. I got so lucky, guys. I got so lucky that I was able to do that. We got notes of gratitude from Aras, who says the daily news has been heartbreaking as of late. Hadn't noticed. Thank you for pointing it out. I thought it's all sunshine over here in the United States. But AVRant has been a bright spot each week. Aras, I agree with you. Dale continues to go through our back catalog and got to the point that he reached the oldest episode available on the YouTube page. Any way to view the older episodes prior to 505.
And yes, if you weren't following us all those years back then, we used to have YouTube videos that went on Tom's YouTube page, which
that's right, they're on my YouTube page.
Has not been active for quite a while, but they are still there. And
they're there.
Actually, if you go to our AVRant YouTube page and go to the About section, we do have a link there that takes you back to the full playlist of episodes that are on Tom's YouTube channel, but we'll have the link to that right here in this episode if you want to click on that. That goes all the way back to episode number 354, and prior to that, we weren't doing video episodes. There were a few experiments with Uvu, and I don't think those work anymore because Uvu is long gone.
Yeah, Uvu's dead. Yeah. Still got notes of gratitude here from David, Ryan, Martin, Karl, who hopes everyone in my household recovers from COVID ASAP, and we have. Thank you very much, Karl. Jay, Greg, Max, and Max. So there we go. That's our notes of gratitude. Aras, Dale, David, Ryan, Martin, Karl, Jay, Greg, and Max.
I'll say it one more time just so it's from my lips. Aras, Dale, David, Ryan, Martin, Karl, Jay, Greg, and Max. Thank you all so much for the notes of gratitude. The notes of encouragement are greatly appreciated. Big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in their question. And a couple more people get on this list of listeners of the week for a fun little reason.
That's right. Gurinder and Mark. You know why we're mentioning you. Thank you very much. So...
if you're like, why are we talking about them? What was so special?
Don't worry about it. You don't have to worry about them. They're just.
I mean, can I just say it was something to do with the last episode of AVRant, and that's as much as I'll say. That's all the hint you need.
There you go. So in the news, the HDMI forum announced a new feature called "We Just Broke Everything" again. Probably.
Seems a little.
I assume.
Seems a little. Yeah. Well.
We'll go
through
I'm going to be honest with you. Every new feature they have should be called that, as far as I'm concerned. By the way, you guys finally got it working. We broke it again.
Right.
So the new feature is called HDMI Cable Power. It's part of the latest HDMI 2.1a Amendment 1 specification. I hate you, HDMI forum group. People, I hate you. I hate you.
I mean, I have to put that in there because that is the name. If you want to look up where to find the details about HDMI cable power, it is under the specification for HDMI 2.1a Amendment 1. That is right. That is the name.
Lowercase a, uppercase amendment.
Well, I put the uppercase amendment. I don't know if there's an uppercase amendment.
There's going to be V1, V2 at the end of this, and then there's going to be V1 Mark III.
We haven't had amendments before, so there you go.
I know.
We're starting a whole new thing.
So if you think that spec name is clunky, just remember the HDMI forum really, really doesn't want spec numbers being mentioned and just wants individual features to be listed instead, which has never confused anybody ever because shorthand's for the mentally weak. If you think about it, they're for the people who don't want you to say the name of the receiver. They just want you to list the brand and every feature it has, so you know.
But I think
they don't put the model on there.
I think this
just
is
every
why
single feature.
They're happy to call it HDMI 2.1a Amendment 1 because they're like, hey, if we just make it horrible to say and print out and nobody wants to do it, they'll stop using those darn spec numbers because that's really their goal. They don't want spec numbers mentioned.
Can we stop using HDMI? How about that? Let's just do that instead.
That's going to be tricky to wean ourselves off of that.
HDMI cable power standardizes and alters how active HDMI cables for long cable lengths will work going forward. HDMI cables that support HDMI cable power will be one direction. Whatever. No damage will occur if you plug them in backwards, but the connection will only work if you plug the source side into the transmitting device and the sync side into the receiving device. Oh, I'm so glad they called it sync.
Mm-hmm. And they spell it S-I-N-K. That's how they spell it. They don't spell it S-Y-N-C, which would make more sense. They spell it sink, like faucet and sink. I don't know, man. I had to, that's what it is.
Why would they do this? Why would they do this?
And they called it source and sync, so they both start with S, so you can't even shorten it in a little logo or something to make it more obvious.
So I just want to say, for the future, the first person, Rob, we'll have to remember this. The first person that emails us and says, I installed a new HDMI cable in my wall, the wrong direction. Is there any way I can use it? Listener of the week. Okay? Yeah. They get to be listener of the week that week because
it's going to happen.
Because it's going to happen. And I feel bad for you. And I'm in advance rewarding you for admitting that you made a mistake. And that's the hardest part. And now and fixing it will not be easy and probably be very expensive. So that's so dumb. Oh my God. Source and sync. Thank you. All categories of HDMI cables can potentially support HDMI cable power. No products have been announced as of yet.
So we skipped one little paragraph there, the detail of it. Yeah.
Power is supplied by the HDMI cable power compatible source device. This is the reverse of current HDMI active HDMI cables, which draw their power from the sync device. So your receiver will have to have the power to push to power
its
the active
output,
cable
on its output,
instead of the other,
or your
other
player
side.
or game system or cable box or whatever will need to have the power on it. The source device will have to have the power for the HDMI cable power.
I don't understand why these can't be unidirectional and why they can't have power at both sides. Why can't it be unidirectional and have power?
That would be dual directional. Unidirectional is one direction.
I'm sorry. Did I say uni?
Yeah.
I meant omnidirectional or whatever. Yes, whatever. I don't understand why they can't do that. Why they can't?
Well, because
they
got to have something for HDMI 2.1a Amendment 2. That's what they need. This, I'm like, we already have active HDMI cables, but they were never.
Do they not talk to people?
They were never officially part of this of the spec. That's the issue.
Right.
Active HDMI cables were never officially part of the spec. They worked by drawing the power needed for the cable from the sync device. In other words, your TV. It drew the power from the TV. So it didn't matter what your source devices were. It was drawing the power needed for the active HDMI cable from the TV. Now that there is an official spec, they're like, well, let's just turn that around. We'll turn it around so that all of your existing sources, they're not going to be able to do this. You'd have to replace the HDMI board with a new board that supports HDMI cable power in order to do this. So it's only going to be new products going forward, none of which have been announced yet. It's a bizarre, I don't even want to call it solution. It's so strange to me that they would not, like, why not just codify what already exists? I don't know.
I honestly don't. I don't feel like
really
the HDMI people are locked in a cave somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, they are just down in some sort of bunker, like quarantining from the world.
Right. Well,
and in a bubble, they are creating things without ever asking literally anybody.
Well,
like any rational, like just grabbing somebody off the street and say, "This is what we're going to do. Does that make sense to you?" And have literally anybody look them dead in the eye and say, "Are you insane? Have you lost your mind? What are you talking about?"
The announcement alluded to, like, oh, this means you won't need to have a separate power source for your active HDMI cables anymore. And I'm like, but we haven't. That's not the way they've been working. Like, there were some fiber optic ones early on where that had a separate little USB pigtail that had to be plugged into power. That hasn't been what you can buy from, like, Cable Matters or Cables to Go or Monoprice or Sewell, all the places that have active or fiber optic HDMI cables. None of them have a separate little USB pigtail anymore. They just draw the power from the television. I don't know. The whole thing is bizarre to me, but let's be aware of it, because now if you see a thing with HDMI cable power, like, here's the thing. What's going to happen? You buy a source device, a future source device that does have HDMI cable power. Then you have an older active HDMI cable that isn't part of the spec, the one that used to draw its power from the TV. Like, I don't see any reason why that wouldn't still work, because the TV is still going to be the way the TV was.
Right.
So, it's just, I foresee the possibility of something I haven't quite worked out in my brain yet, haven't quite figured out how it will break your HDMI connection, but I'm just envisioning the day where we get a question of, like, I bought all these HDMI things and for some reason I get no signal no matter what I do, and I'm going to be like, it's going to have something to do with HDMI cable power. I haven't figured out what that's going to be yet, but I rue the day because I figure it's going to happen at some point.
I don't know. I don't understand why the old HDMI cable won't still work, though. I mean,
it should.
It should. Even if you had two new a new receiver and a new TV that were HDMI cable power enabled, it should still work. The old cable should still work. But they'll probably break it on purpose. I mean, I'm going to be dead honest with you. That's probably what they're going to do.
There's something we haven't thought of, and it's going to end up being that. That's what we're predicting.
All right. Thank you, HDMI, for taking this day and just absolutely ruining it for everybody. I want to. Your work here is done. Go back to your stupid cave and come up with something else dumb.
Good times.
You know, and the thing is they're probably all very nice people.
I'm
sure. If you met them, I'm sure they're all very nice,
and
very
they've
thoughtful
probably been
people,
working on this for like 2 years, and it takes until now to actually get it all codified and
I mean,
finalized.
My frustration with them with HDMI is just that it just keeps happening.
Right.
It keeps happening. Like, it never stops. Like, the things I thought were going to be good about HDMI have not been. Like, the HDMI control, I thought, okay, well, this will at least be a feature people like and use, and it's not, and it's because it's implemented weirdly across devices. I thought Ethernet, getting so that you plug in anything plugged in by HDMI would all have access to the internet without having to, have separate. Nope, that doesn't work. At least I've never gotten it to work.
Yeah, I certainly haven't been using my AV receiver as an Ethernet hub. That hasn't happened.
I just all the stuff I thought HDMI was going to be good at doing, it just doesn't. It doesn't do it good. And so you end up. You end up going. I'm using this exactly the same ways I use component video cables. Except that it also has audio. Yeah. So, and that's it. That's like the only thing. And I just don't believe that. I mean, we needed it. And they have, to me, HDMI has not borne the fruits of what it promised. And it's just ended up being, essentially, we could have done this all with fiber optic and you guys just decided not to. And that's stupid. Samsung's new QD OLED TVs weren't the only ones cheating on measurement results by detecting common test brighten my screen. Common test patterns and appearing to measure accurately, only to revert to being over brightened and oversaturated with anything other than standard test pattern material, whatever. Flat Panels HD reviewed Samsung's so it's another Samsung's QN95B Neo QLED and found that it overbrightened the HDR EOTF even more than the QD-OLEDs. But more than that, with a 10% test pattern window, it would artificially spike the peak light output so that reviewers would report a higher peak brightness than what you'll actually get with regular content. Having been caught yet again, Samsung issued a statement to say they will update their QLED TVs just like they recently and quickly updated their QD-OLEDs. It's probably fair to expect the same approach where only filmmaker mode is updated, and so people have been like bad mouthing Samsung for a long time. In my the readings I've done, Reddit and some forums, I would never buy another. I've had good luck with Samsung's TVs. The last Samsung TV I reviewed was a plasma, so I'll tell you how long ago that was. Right. But this is just like pretty nefarious, and they're like, well, we got away with it once, let's just keep doing it. Yeah, you're gonna keep finding this throughout every line probably. Any of their high end lines that they know they're gonna get, that they're gonna be placed up against something else.
Yeah, which there's gonna be reviews with measurements. That's clearly what was going on here.
Clearly what was going on here.
Yep.
Comments. Aras agreed with Rob's take on the movie Her and suggests Ex Machina, which is a great movie, as a movie that toys with some similar ideas but with totally different approach. He also wanted to mention that all of John Carpenter's movies that have come out on Ultra HD Blu-ray have been great examples for Dolby Atmos soundtracks that make use of front wides. The two notable exceptions, The Fog, which isn't Atmos, and Escape from New York, which has Atmos but doesn't put any sounds into the front wides at all. So,
some movie suggestions.
Which one's The Fog? Is that the one with the pirates?
No, isn't
I'm thinking of The Mist.
Oh, yeah, that's The Mist. The Fog.
The Stephen King one is the Mist one, right?
I think so.
I think the Fog one is the pirate one. No, I don't know.
We can look it up later.
No, whatever. It's got something to do with that. Anyways. Ian has suggestions for Infinite Gary's question about using an Apple TV or Roku Ultra to play audio only without having to turn his TV on. Ian uses an HDMI to RCA adapter. It's only $12 and lets him use his older Apple TV devices that he would have otherwise gotten rid of as makeshift multi-room audio sources, since he can use AirPlay 2 to send audio and control any of the Apple TVs without needing a display attached to them. Since the RCA adapter has to convert from digital to analog video, it is recognized as a sync device by the Apple TV, just like a TV would be.
So an interesting solution to that. Only $12. It is, of course, limited to what composite video can output. So you gotta set your Apple TV for some pretty low spec as far as the resolution coming out of there, because this is not a scaler. So you basically got to set your Apple TV to output 480 as far as the resolution goes. But you can, and that's fine. And when all you want is the audio anyway, then yeah, that's a good solution. It means that your Apple TV detects that it's plugged into something, plugged into a sync device, and that's what we needed. So great solution. Thank you, Ian.
All right, Greg. Greg wanted to weigh in on using Sonos as for an open living room home theater setup after Blake's question last week for his in-laws. This is the one where we were like, yeah, it's not going to work. Anyways, Greg refers to Sonos as audio crack because once he started, he kept buying more and more of them. While he has a dedicated theater with a den and receiver and a 5.4.4 speaker configuration, he also has a regular TV setup, and he uses a Sonos Beam soundbar with the Sonos Sub and a pair of Sonos 3 speakers as surrounds. He finds it very good for watching sports and casual viewing, pretty darn good for movies, and pretty good for music. He'd suggest getting the Arc soundbar and one Sonos Sub for Blake's in-laws. Start with that and expand later if they want to. But he does think there are some downsides. The Sonos Sub is the weak link, in his opinion, and seems to play sounds all the way up to 200 hertz, so it's localizable. And he doesn't think using a pair of them would work particularly well. He also got a Sonos Connect so that he could use it in his dedicated theater with his Denon receiver, but the Denon's own processing adds a little bit of delay, and there's no way to adjust for that, so it sounds like there's an echo or reverb if any other Sonos speakers are playing in the house at the same time as his theater, and that's a bummer. But otherwise, he thinks Sonos would be a good solution for Blake's in-laws and most other people who want a clean, simple to use living room setup. Yes, Sonos is I have not used it, but by everybody's reports, it is easy to use, and that's what you're paying for. So, and yes,
the styling
everybody agrees.
too. I would say part of what you're paying for is the styling, because it's aesthetically
there's value
there. Like it. Absolutely, there's value there.
There's value there. I can't express enough how irritated I get by people who are like, oh, if you want to be serious about home theater, if you want to really know what's going on, you have to buy a U-Mic 1 and use RoomyQ Wizard. I'm like, no one's doing that. Shut up. You're not even doing it. Shut up. It's not. No. There is a value to ease of use.
If someone says
people are willing to pay for it.
Because of the looks and the ease of use, I'm willing to put speakers in this room and I wouldn't be otherwise, well, that's a whole lot better to have those in there than not. So, no, I'm on board. Like I said, I was not angry at that idea whatsoever of potentially going with Sonos. We gave some alternatives, talked about the pluses and minuses. Hopefully that's enough for Blake and his in-laws to decide which direction they want to go. Yeah.
I agree. Some questions here. Dale says, many thanks for a discussion about which of his 2 bedrooms he should convert to a dedicated theater. He's going to take our advice and go with a slightly larger spare bedroom that only has one window and has its closet opening in the middle of the back wall. Great. I'm
not sure how much Tom remembers about that. We spent quite a while talking about it.
I do remember about this. Yes,
that was the reminder.
This is because the window was easy to negotiate. Regarding acoustic treatments, he liked what we suggested, which was corner bass traps in the 2 front corners, a couple of panels over the window for the first reflections, and matching panels on the right wall, and then fill up the whole closet opening in the middle of the back wall. However, their house has very little storage space, and they really need that closet opening for storing clothes and whatnot. Rob actually said that might be perfectly fine. Just want to confirm if they continue using the open closet for clothes storage, will that be okay acoustically? I mean, it's not going to absorb like 20 hertz, but it's going to do better than nothing. So
absolutely,
I'm fine with it. I mean, it's like one of those things you're like, oh well, no, you have to scrap every plan you have because you're not willing to put fiberglass insulation floor to ceiling in that closet. I'm sorry, sir, you're dead to us. Go your merry way and never to return. No, man, throw some clothes in there. I mean,
absolutely. That will act as acoustic absorption. Having the closet. So the only comment I wanted on that was, if you have like some choices about what gets stored in what room, right? Like maybe you have some boxes or
put the winter coats in there.
Exactly. Put the things that are kind of like, fluffy and cushiony and fabric-y, put those in this home theater room, and the things that are like stored in hard boxes or something like that, put that in the other room. That's really the only comment I had about that. As long as you can do that, the clothes stored in that closet opening, they will act as acoustic absorption. You can still use our idea of having like just a curtain that closes over it to make it look really nice, and that's what I would do
fine. For sure.
Yeah.
Curtain that closes over it, and if there's room behind the clothes on that wall, and sometimes there is, and maybe it's only a couple of inches, put a panel back there. It doesn't even have to be the cheapest panel you can get. Just put it back there, and it has to be covered with something, because you don't want your clothes rubbing up against fiberglass.
Probably not. Yeah, that could get itchy.
But put something back there. That would be perfectly fine. That would be, that would absorb a little bit more, and you would be able to store your clothes and everything else. I absolutely think function has to have a place in all of these home theaters. Sure. Like, people are like, oh, it's a dedicated room, so nothing can be in there. That's not that's not because of the fact that we're home theater. It's like, no, man, it's a closet. Sometimes you need to put clothes or like board games in there. Just do it. For the panels on the side walls and covering the window, could he put up the acoustic panels and hang frame posters in front of them?
Don't do
Could
that.
you?
Oh, yeah, right. Is it physically possible? Yes.
Is it physically possible to do such a thing? Yes. Would I recommend you do that? No. What I recommend you do is get printed panels that have the posters printed on them, and we've talked multiple times about how to do that. There is a article in AV Gadgets that's, I think, we'll link it up. It's something like the trick for getting movie posters in your home theater legally, or something like that. And basically what it is you can put the image on there, because you can't use all the words. Right. Is what it comes down to. It can't be the actual
poster. Yeah.
It can't be the actual poster, but it could be part of the poster. So what people do is they like cut out the words at the top and the bottom. Sure. They just use the middle bit. That is it's Jaws coming up from the bottom, or Marty McFly coming out the car and looking at his watch or with his glasses or whatever the thing is. You know what movie that is. You don't need Back to the Future to be on there for you to know what movie that is. So I will find the link when we go on here, and I'll give it to Rob, and we'll have it in there. But that's what I would do. It would cost a little bit more, but you don't really want the poster to be on the front of these panels. I mean, aside from the fact that it's going to reduce the amount of high frequency absorption that you're going to get
significantly,
it's also going to it could vibrate, like think of like a piece of paper like flapping in the wind. There's a lot of stuff, that could go wrong there. So I would highly recommend you either get the printed panels, or you get the posters and put them in between the printed panels, or in between your normal panels. Just put them on the wall someplace around the panels, not on top of. So we mentioned that Dick and Acoustic have room kits.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
I just wanted to with the panels that are going on the sidewalls and over the window, those are specifically for your first reflections. Those aren't just a general let's have insulation anywhere in this room just to cut down on reverberation time. Those ones are specifically for first reflections, for strong reflections coming off of those locations. So you can't really have a hard reflective surface, which the poster would act as, acoustically speaking, for the high frequencies. Then you're kind of just defeating the purpose of putting those posters, of putting those panels in those specific locations.
So we mentioned that Gick and that Acoustic have room kits that package together some bass traps and panels. Sure enough, the smaller kits are 4 bass traps that go in the corners and 6 panels to go in the walls. But if he isn't going to be putting any panels in the closet on the back wall, he figures you could stack the 4 bass traps in the 2 front corners and have floor-to-ceiling bass traps, and then put 2 panels on each side wall, as we suggested. That would leave 2 extra panels. Where should these go? Well, then maybe in that closet, like I said. But yeah, I mean, so he's going to stack the. So we said the 2 front corners. Where's he putting his subwoofers? Did we talk about that?
It was probably going to be the front right corner and the rear left corner. That's more than likely. Okay. But yeah, he's going for smaller size subwoofers, so there's no real reason why those can't go like in front of the corner panels.
Right.
If you have those 2 extra panels from the kit lying around, first of all, total up the price, because just buying the things separately might still, there is a little bit of a discount for getting the kit. But I think if you just went in there and totaled up for, regular 2-inch thick panels and 4 4-inch thick corner bass traps, that probably is still cheaper than getting the kit. So, Just from that point of view, there's no reason why you have to buy it in kit form. You can just put together your own collection. So just total it up and make sure that the cost savings are actually there to do that. But if you do end up with 2 extra panels, Yeah, the front wall is still an option. You can definitely put them on the front wall behind your front, left, and right speakers because they're only going to be 2 inches thick. So that is another place that they could go.
Okay. Oh, wait, did I read all that?
Yep.
Okay. It's hardwood flooring, so does he need to carpet the whole room, or could he just put a rug between the TV and the couch? Well, I would at least put a rug between the TV and the couch.
Yeah, I think that's really all you need to do.
I mean, you're talking about putting enough paneling in here that, I mean, you're not going to get 30% of the room. It's not.
But you're going to get 15.
But, yeah, I would. I don't think that you need to cover up that hardwood. I know people are like, "Oh, you need carpet in here." I'm like, I really don't think carpet does all that much.
Now there's the opposite side saying they want more hard surfaces because there's all this. Now the pendulum has swung the other way with everyone saying that the rooms are over deadened now. So that seems to be the trend as of the time that we're recording this. But no, I think a rug on your floor is absolutely fine. Get one of those 1/2-inch thick felt pads to go underneath your rug. You can get them for about $60-$70 from Amazon. The felt rug pad that's about 1/2 inch thick. That's the thickest one that they've got. Get one of those, trim it up so that it fits nicely under whatever rug you get, and that's absolutely fine.
He says, should he paint the room in the Sherwin-Williams gray paint that we always mention? Would it be okay to leave the ceiling white? He intends to keep using his OLED with no plans to switch to a projection setup. I mean, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the Sherwin-Williams gray color because there's multiple shades of that, depths of darkness of that. And I'm going to get some samples and I'm going to paint them on the wall and I'm going to look at my wife and say, which one? And, and I'm just going to tell her, for me, it's the darker the better, but you choose.
Sure.
And then I'm going to go with that one. That's what I would do. Leaving the ceiling white, I've said it 1,000 times. I'm going to continue to say it. I'm never going to say anything else. I think painting your ceiling is dumb. Okay, I think that it's you are creating a massive amount of work for yourself to do it for not a lot of benefit, in my opinion, and also. You now have to undo it. Like if somebody walks into a gray room, they go, okay, well, it's gray. I don't necessarily love it that it's this dark, but it's gray. It's fine. They walk into a room with a black ceiling and they're like, something must be done before I will buy this house because this is ridiculous. I am not doing this. So yes, I would say leave the ceiling white. Rob is probably just going to disagree.
No, I'm totally fine with leaving the ceiling white in this case because it's not a projection setup. This is with your OLED. That's fine. The OLED is not going to have any problems maintaining its contrast and black levels, regardless of what color or brightness your room is. So I'm totally fine with that. I'm not sure if he was asking maybe he would just prefer to not paint the room at all, just leave the entire room white, which, again, I'm fine with that, too. I'm not really worried about that. And I've got
an article over at AV Gadgets that talks about this, where how to put up fabric in different ways you can put up fabric instead. So that if you want to just leave the whole room white and then just take fabric and put it around the front of the front wall and maybe even the ceiling or whatever, so that you can take it down afterwards, that's the solution I think makes more sense in a home theater that's not going to be a dedicated forever home theater that's clearly a home theater. It's not just a converted bedroom.
But yeah, if you were going to paint anyway, Sherwin-Williams is the brand we recommend. And if you don't want to remember the numbers, it's the SW707 series. If you don't want to remember that, just look up gray screen and that'll get you to the correct series. And then there's just darker variations with different names of that same gray.
Yeah. So his couch is wider than his current TV, which is pretty typical. We often mention that we like to have our front speakers at least a little bit wider than the primary seating. So how wide apart should his front left and right speakers go? He's thinking about mounting them on the front wall along with his TV. And since the room is so narrow, if the front left and right speakers are wider apart than his couch's width, that puts them pretty darn close to being in the two front corners. So where would his corner bass traps go? All right. So my couch is almost as wide as my room. Okay. So it is slammed up against one wall so that, there's a walkway on the other side so you can get to the back of the room and to the bathroom that's back there. So I have it essentially flanking my projection screen, which puts my left speaker in line with the left arm on the left side of the couch, but the right speaker is kind of firing directly into the middle of the seat that is to the as
so
far
you do
right
have
as you can go.
Some portion of your seats are outside the boundaries of your speakers in Tom's case.
Yes, right. And anybody who would voluntarily sit over there, of which I am not one, does not care. So I think if you have the option, have them lined up at the very least, in line with the arms of your couch, or maybe a little bit wider. If you have to cheat them in, you have to cheat them in, and that's fine. That's what the center channel is for, so that it still anchors the voices at the screen without you having to be sitting directly between the two speakers. That's what it's for. So, if you have to cheat them in a little bit because of placement issues and where your screen is and everything else, that's fine. But if you have your druthers right at the no further in than the arms of your couch, and a little bit wider if you can. So that's the way I would go that.
For sure. Like, I'm more concerned actually about not having my front left and right speakers so wide apart that when a image on screen pans over and moves off the left of the screen, sometimes there's like that sound should be continuous, and if your speakers are too wide apart, it sounds like it jumped a distance, because your speakers are physically considerably wider apart than your screens. So it's all a balancing act, and I agree, it's certainly not the end of the world if your front left and right speakers in a small compact setup like this are actually a little bit narrower together than the width of your seating, because your seating is almost going to be edge to edge. You've only got less than 2 feet on either side of your couch, as we worked out the last time we talked about this. So it's it's going to be a little bit of compromise, but that's fine. Don't worry yourself about that.
So if he ends up wall mounting all of his speakers, how high do the front speakers need to go, and how high do the surround speakers need to go? So we've talked about this a number of times. Your front speakers, your center doesn't really count, but your front left and right speakers their tweeters should be at ear height when you're seated, wherever that is. So you kind of figure out how high you're, from the bottom of the speaker to the middle of the tweeter, that is, and then figure out where your ear will be on your couch, and then try to get it pretty close, meaning, right around there. I mean, if it's like an inch or 2 or 3 or off, I mean, people on Reddit are going to say that's wrong, but they're all a bunch of idiots.
Don't worry too much about that.
Then the surround speakers, we talked about this, to your sides, a little bit behind you, and high enough so that every ear between, on that side has a line of sight to the tweeter. So usually about 2 feet up.
1.5, 2 feet. That's about it.
Yeah, and that'll usually do it. And especially if you have a reclining couch, it's going to be that 1.5 is probably about right. If your seats don't recline, then 2 feet.
Yeah,
but about like that.
Just imagine that if you were the tweeter of the speaker, if that's you, your viewpoint is from where the tweeter of the speaker is. You want to be able to see everybody's ears. That's what we're going for.
Yeah, and if you can't, just make sure you can see the ear that would be yours in the middle of that couch. He asked, does he need to angle his surround speakers?
Nope.
I cannot tell you how angry I get by reading people talk about how every speaker should be pointed at the main listening position, and any setup other than that is objectively wrong. And I'm like,
well,
how can you believe that?
When you look at the diagrams, and in fact, if we get to it, I was looking. Somebody thankfully forwarded Dolby Professional's sort of white paper guidelines on how to set up a dubbing stage, how to set up a recording studio, which was really interesting reading. I hadn't actually gone through that whole document before. So in there, they've got their mention of, you can point all the speakers at that one seat, because this is for a single person mixing and mastering.
Yes.
And you can point it all. But they also have the line right in there, as long as the listening position is within the dispersion window of all of the speakers, that's fine. Now, of course, some people like to key in on just the first part that says aim all the speakers at the one seat, and they ignore...
You're going to have to send me that link.
They ignore the second... we'll have it.
I need that link. Yeah.
They ignore the second part.
So I wrote an article at AV Gadgets, everything wrong with Dolby speaker layout diagrams, and it's all about this.
Right.
It's all about how the diagrams have them all pointed there, and everybody does it. Like I've seen home theaters where it is a couch, three or four seater couch, and it's sitting like 4 or 5, 6 feet from the TV and the speakers, and every speaker is facing that tower speakers facing directly at the center of that couch. Klipsch tower speakers. I'm like, that must be Klipsch. I have never wanted to hear directly on axis. They're very much meant to be heard a little bit off axis. But holy moly, and people are like, "Oh, that's a if you don't do it this way, everything's wrong." I'm like, how can you even hear anybody anymore? I mean, is your ears still work? I don't know. Anyways, he's thinking he might replace his golden ear sub. Naturally, he knows we strongly suggest getting dual subs. He's considered SVS. What models would we recommend for dual subs in his room? Isn't this room tiny?
It is.
I felt like this room was tiny.
Basically
it's 11
10 by 10. 11 by 10 is more or less what
11 by 10. So the SB1000?
SB1000 Pros. SB1000 Pros. This is the room for them. And this is
saving the money.
You'll be happy to go with those because, they're the least expensive, so that's always good.
And they're small.
It's the size. You want the small size. You don't have the room to spare in here, and those are absolutely adequate for this room size. They're the perfect choice for this.
Yeah. And no, don't come at us with, but what if I get the SB2000 or maybe the PC2000s? They are pretty small too. It's like, you're paying to turn down the sub, okay? You're only paying to turn down the sub. You're not really getting any more extension. You're certainly not getting more usable output because you're not going to be turning them up loud enough to use it because the room is too small. Save the money, buy two, save the floor space.
Yep.
I mean, thank your lucky stars. A lot of people are like, I want to have a huge home theater. Do you know what it costs to have a huge home theater? And having speakers that can fill it and subwoofers that can pressurize it and amps and everything else that you need and the extra speakers for all the different rows. No, man. This is the way to go. Small room, small subs. Get two of them, put them in the corners.
You saved yourself.
You're good.
Lots of hassle and money.
Dan's current setup includes a pair of Velodyne DD10 Plus subs that he intends to keep, which I don't blame you because those are pretty nice subs. And he has a pair of insulating speakers that he will also be staying, but he wants to change his 5 main speakers, which are all DefTech Mythos. He has the large Mythos towers up front with their powered subwoofer drivers built in. Then he has the Mythos 10 on-wall speakers as his center and surrounds. My back itches. It feels good. He wants speakers that are much more neutral and linear, and he doesn't want towers anymore. In fact, if you get all 5 of his speakers, mounted on his walls and 5 identical speakers, he really likes that idea since his TV is already wall-mounted and the whole setup could look slick and uniform that way. So he started researching and was a bit surprised to find so many positive reviews of the newish Polk Reserve series speakers. In his previous experience, Polk speakers have their own sound, but according to multiple reviews and the measurements that some of them provide, the Reserve series seems to be different. One of the models is the R350, which they specifically describe as an LCR model that can be used either vertically or horizontally. It comes with keyhole wall mounts on the back with a 7-inch depth. It's a sealed design with a minus 3 dB spec at 75 Hertz and quite high power handling with typically 87 dB sensitivity. So it really seems to check all the boxes that he's looking for, and the $600 each price is reasonable to him. So what do we think? Would it be worth giving them a try to see if Polk speakers might actually replace his DefTechs? I mean, anything can replace your DefTechs. I mean, that's easy. Just buy something else, put it on the wall. Let me look at these real quick. So what are you saying, Rob, here?
There are more than one set of measurements out there that as far as, so there is a little bit of a caveat to this, as far as the on-axis frequency response, these are probably some of the most linear measuring Polk speakers that we've seen. That's a good thing. I mean, Polk is owned by Sound United now, and I have a suspicion that they've had an influence over the brand, that they're just like, let's just go for linear. That's what works. That's what we know how to do. However, these are still using the ring radiator tweeter. That's sort of become a little bit of a signature thing with Polk these days, are ring radiator tweeters. And they have seemingly, again, going by the measurements where they're looking at the dispersion of this particular ring radiator tweeter, it is able to play to a higher frequency with pretty wide dispersion, which is unusual for a ring radiator. Most ring radiator tweeters are very directional. These ones, they've been engineered, at least according to all the measurements, to play upwards of about 5,000, 6,000 hertz before they really start to beam. But above that, they are very, very beamy, as we would expect a ring radiator tweeter to be. So they're still not quite the really wide dispersion that you get with some other tweeter designs, but only at very high frequencies. So what you're going to find with these is that if you're off axis from them, the really high stuff, the what audiophiles would refer to as the air of the speaker, some of that you're probably going to start to lose if you're off axis. This is a speaker that's going to sound a little bit different if you're able to hear that high in frequency response. That is going to sound a little bit different directly on axis versus off axis, but overall, they are a very linear measuring speaker and do play higher with that ring radiator than I might just expect. But if you just said this is a ring radiator tweeter, I might expect it to be more directional at a lower frequency than this one is. So everything looks well designed. I would certainly say this is a speaker I'd be completely willing to audition. I'm not going to tell you this is a waste of time. If you like the looks and the form factor and the price and everything, these are a speaker that I would be quite happy to say, yeah, audition them. I wouldn't necessarily say replace everything sight unheard. Maybe just get one or just get a pair and try it out. But it's not going to be a waste of your time from anything that I'm seeing about them. The only thing I would mention is that I can give a thumbs up to Aperian's on-wall speakers. They do not have the same slim form factor. These are, look like a traditional bookshelf speaker, but just not very deep and, accommodate wall mounting. So those are available in 3 different finishes, similar to the Polks, and come in at a lower price point. Depending on the finish, they're going to be between $450 and $500 each versus the $600 each of the Polks that you mentioned. And they're on sale right now, the Aperian on-wall speakers, going for between $382 and $425 each, depending on what finish you select. So if it's not the form factor that you really wanted, that's just a lower cost option that is a very linear tell it like it is speaker as well.
So I first thought of Monoprice and their THX on wall speakers.
They don't have a lot of output capability though. They're
the only
THX
thing.
compact.
Yeah. I wish I knew how big this guy's room was. We don't know, right?
Not particularly, but he sort of mentioned that he likes that they have the higher power handling in that Polk.
The question in my mind is, do you like that they like the have the higher power handling, or because that's what
do you
like
actually need it?
Or do you actually need it? And if you actually need it, how do you feel about buying amps? Because sometimes people want to buy amps and they don't know how to, and this is one way you can. So the Monoprice OW1 THX certified on-wall speakers, whatever, they are not rated for huge, massive rooms. No. But that does not mean that they can't. They're not going to be capable of filling the space. You just have to give it a lot of power.
If you're within 10 feet, they're going to be okay.
They're going to be fine. Yeah. So I would take a look at those.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I'm not gonna warn you away from those Polk reserves. They do look intriguing.
I don't love that it's like they're pretty freaking huge. You know what I mean? They're really quite
sure, but
big.
It's just they have a narrow aesthetic to them.
Yes,
but yeah, those are 4.5-inch drivers in there, or 4.25, whatever it is, around 4 inches or a little bit more. So they aren't teeny tiny. These aren't the super duper skinny little sticks. Those are fairly sizable drivers in there.
Yeah. All right, let me get back to the questions here because I was looking at something else. He'd like to eventually upgrade his AV receivers, but he's been waiting on better HDMI 2.1 support. Should he continue waiting for Denon to announce their new lineup, whenever that might be? He has a Sony 5000 ES right now. I mean, why are you updating? Because did he already say he had a 5 point? I'm getting confused with other people's questions. Right. He didn't say how many speakers he's got. So maybe he does want to he wants to add the Atmos. He doesn't have Atmos. Is that what the 500 ES, would that indicate that?
I don't really think that was the issue. Yeah, I'm not totally sure on that. I mean, just my blanket answer is if this isn't really, really pressing, I would wait. I am expecting new Denon models to get announced for this year. I might be wrong about that. I don't have any insider information about that, but I just sort of am expecting, as we went in.
It's not Atmos.
Yeah, we went an entire year without any new models, which is unusual for them, but it was understandable because that was all COVID-related stuff and AKM fire-related stuff. But I am sort of expecting new models this year. So if there's nothing really pressing, I would wait, just because I don't really want to get a model that only has a single HDMI 2.1 input. And if you're not like just dying from your current receiver right now, then I think just waiting makes the most sense.
There is not a lot of reason to buy a new receiver right now if you can get away with it. Yeah. The only thing that HDMI 2.1 adds that most people care about is gaming features.
It really is.
So if you're not that person, and I think most people, even when they are that person, they get it and they're like, I don't know, it looks the same to me. I mean, it doesn't really make that much difference. I just don't see that it's really necessary for most people. Yeah. This is an HDMI update that has not really proven to me that it is needed in for most things. Like, I watch movies and I stream. Okay, well, then you don't need HDMI 2.1, and you may never need it. But I mean, maybe when HDMI power thingy comes out, you'll need it then. Yeah. He says on a different topic, he was setting up his Apple TV and he accidentally clicked OK on the first region that was highlighted. So now his Apple TV thinks he's in Afghanistan and has automatically set itself to 50 hertz output. He manually changed his region to United States and has set the correct time zone and set it to 60 hertz output. But after some amount of time, it always seems to set itself back to Afghanistan. And back to 50 hertz, although the time zone seems to stay put. Any ideas aside from a full factory reset? It would be a pain to have to sign in to all of his streaming services again. That's hilarious, first of all. I mean, that's pretty funny. I will say, for the most part, they have made it much easier to re-sign into your streaming services with your like I sit there with my phone or with my computer and then can sign in from there, and it says, I don't have to remember my passwords. Disney Plus is the one that still makes me do it, I think, manually all the way through. But everybody else, you can kind of do it from a browser that's up from a device that's already logged in. So that one's not
still a little bit of time, but I'm not aware of a way to do this without doing the full factory reset. That's the method I'm aware of to do what you need to do. I wish I had better news, but if somebody knows a better way, by all means, please write in and let us know. But that is what I would have told you to do. Full factory reset. Sorry.
I can't imagine that there's anything that you can do that isn't something you've already done. So, Christian has a Samsung QLED in one room and a Sony OLED in another. Both have DirecTV Genie Mini 4K plugged into them. The Samsung then sends the audio out to the Marantz receiver via HDMI ARC, while the Sony just plays the audio itself. Out of nowhere, thank you, HDMI, he got an error message on the Samsung when he tried to watch 4K DirecTV, saying his TV doesn't support the correct copy protection, so he cannot watch 4K content. He hasn't touched anything or changed any settings, and his Sony setup continues to work just fine. Thank you, Samsung. Any ideas? Could DirecTV have changed something that only impacted his Samsung but not his Sony? Could his audio setup via ARC have anything to do with it?
So my only suspected culprit in this is that this actually is like an HDMI cable that came a bit loose. I can't think of anything else. Like, I think it's as simple as unplug your HDMI cables, reseat them, plug them back in. Because, I mean, they are just a friction fit. They do have some weight that's pulling down on each connector. It absolutely can be the case that HDMI cables come a little bit loose over time just from that. And I think this is just a loose HDMI connection. I can't think of anything else that it would actually be in this instance.
Right. And I've actually heard of people, like, if you have heavier cables or if they're at an angle or something like that, it can actually, sort of loosen up the connection itself, the connector or whatever, the port. So this is a sort of stupidity that makes me wonder why HDMI even exists. But yes, the copy protection can have issues, and they can come out of nowhere, and it can be as easy as what Rob said, which is just unplugging and replugging stuff in and making sure the fit is good. It could be that for whatever reason, the delays are different, or one thing's turning on faster than the other, or you started using it slightly differently, and you're not connecting the two, but something's happening, and you just have to power things on in a different order, or switch from one thing to a different thing, or go to a different port or something. So let's hope it's the cable.
Yeah, I mean, we got to remember there's 19 teeny tiny little pairs of wires inside the HDMI connection. Only 3 or 4 of those pairs actually carry the video signal, and the copy protection thing is one of those other little pairs. I don't know which one it is, and if that's the little connection that came loose, that's all it would take. So I think that's all it is in this case. Yeah, that's my suspect.
All right, Aras. Aras read my article from AV Gadgets about HVAC with great interest, since he tends to close off his living room when he buys a new house, or close off a room in the basement if he's lucky enough to find a house with a good basement option. So is heating and cooling the theater room separately from the rest of the house the ideal, so as to prevent the spread of sound through any HVAC ducts? He took note of the mention of ductless mini split systems. Is that the route he should take? Okay, so I have whole house AC, in a massive, ducting system that's at the back of my room, and I will tell you that the minute I can close that thing off, and just fill it full of insulation so that the sound doesn't travel out of this room quite so easily, I will do so, because I am convinced that's why my wife hears me at night. That is the flanking path that is the easiest to get out. It's clearly how it's happening. A mini split system. So that article came from discussions on this podcast. We had talked to people who had done it, and people had recommended it, and we had kind of recommended it. We had talked about it, and that's where all the advice in that article came from, was directly from this podcast. If I had the ability to do it, I would do it today. If you're going to go with a projector in your room, if you do not have zoned AC so that you can directly cool that room by itself, I would highly recommend, or even warm it, I would highly recommend getting a dedicated mini split system just for your home theater, simply because the temperature variance between that room when it's closed off and you've got insulation on the walls, and extra insulation inside the walls, and 5 people all sitting on the couch watching a movie for 2 hours and breathing, and the projector bulb heating up the room and everything else, the temperature delta can be significant. We're talking like 10 degrees. And
you don't want to blast chill the rest of your house just because you've got one thermometer for the whole house and it's trying to
and not only that,
set it for everything.
Like in my general, my so I have Ecobee, which has like sensors, but because the sensor in here is so far away from the main sensor, it loses connection constantly. And even then, it does exactly what Rob says. It tries to cool the entire house down so that the average is whatever. So if I really want the thermostat to start working, I actually have to pause the movie, open the door, let the heat kind of escape into the rest of the house, so the Ecobee goes, oh yeah, it's hot everywhere now, and then it'll start cooling everything down. It really doesn't work the way you want it to. So if you do not have a dedicated zone for your home theater room, a mini split, absolutely 100% the way to go. And as I suggested in that article, you have to be very careful to make sure that you get one where the setting that is the quietest is also the setting that is the right setting for your size room. So it's not that you're buying the world's biggest one.
Yeah,
so you
overbuying isn't the right idea. Yeah.
Right. You're getting the one that is the quietest on the setting that will keep your room cool, even if you have your projector and 5 people in here.
But aside from just the heating and the cooling, the important part of the HVAC is the V. It's the ventilation part. That's actually the part I'm most worried about when you're talking about potentially putting a door on a room that doesn't already have a door. Because what you need to be able to have is the air exchange itself. You need air to come into, fresh air to come into that room and escape that room. And if the way that the air normally escapes that room is through the opening, and now you put a door on there, you have just restricted the ability for that air to get out of that room in a way that the house wasn't originally designed. My real advice to anybody who's going to be changing a room like this and dealing with HVAC is talk to an HVAC professional. Tom and I are not HVAC professionals. We are not certified on any of that stuff. We just have a little bit of some knowledge of things you should think about before you go ahead and do this thing and run into real major problems, and that's the only warnings we can give you. So talk to an HVAC professional. We're going to say, yes, the ideal and the most expensive solution is you install an entire new furnace and air conditioning system that is completely zone controlled, and you have a completely separate zone just for the theater. But that is probably not what is already installed in your house, and that would be a pretty major and expensive upgrade. So the next best solution is you just have to make sure that air can get into the room, air can get out of the room. That's the really critical part when you're installing a new door, because you probably have HVAC registers in the living room. That would be really unusual not to, but you don't necessarily have an air return that is built into that room. It was probably meant to just escape out of the opening of the living room and go to the air return that's in the hallway or something. That's the way most houses are designed. So it's the air return that you're probably going to have to focus on. As far as the soundproofing goes, that's a fairly easy thing, which is whatever duct line is coming into those registers in that living room, you're just going to have an HVAC professional install a flexible coupling. It's usually a canvas flexible coupling. They literally just cut out a section of the hard metal duct that's in there right now and replace it with a flexible piece that goes in there, and that just acts as a damping where you don't have physical vibration now getting through all of that metal ducting, and that's a pretty easy upgrade. But then once we're sure that we do have air exchange for this now enclosed living room, if you need additional cooling, that's where a mini split really, really makes sense. So that's most of it. But talk to an HVAC professional, please.
Right. We are not that. Yeah. That's very important to mention, that we have gleaned information from our experience. But
at least you can ask about this stuff now. Now that we've mentioned it, you can ask, but that sparks the conversation to get you in the right direction. That's our goal.
Right. Okay. As crazy as it might sound, he says he probably would paint the walls black, even a living room, and most certainly if he's able to find a good basement option. But we have mentioned the specific gray paint several times, right? So would there be an advantage with going with a dark gray versus completely black? I mean, just
resale.
So many in my book. Yeah, so many. So yes, there is. We mentioned it, the gray screen one or whatever it is.
Sherwin-Williams. Yeah, Sherwin-Williams. Just look up gray screen. That gets you to the correct family, the SW707 family of gray paints. So that's all you need to look up there. I mean So look, in pure performance with a projection setup, black is superior. That includes the ceiling. That includes the floor. If we're being, talking about going completely theoretical, but the resell of your house is where going with dark gray is much more acceptable to people than full black. So you're just going to have to weigh that a bit. If you're like, hey, this is my forever house and I'm never moving and I'm fine with the entire thing being black, okay, it is on a technical level the superior thing to do for the image from your projection screen. But yeah, Tom hates the way it looks and feels. I hate what it would do to your resale value, but I mean, it is paint. It can be painted over. It's just much tougher to do so over black, whereas gray is trendy. People are quite happy with gray. So
even dark gray you can probably get away with, but I would highly recommend gray, and don't paint your ceiling. If he does end up painting the room black or even just dark gray, would we still say that the JVC NP5 projector is his best choice, or will we say the NZ7 or maybe even the NZ8 would be worth it now? He's looked at the house. He's looked at the house of...
I have no idea what I was writing there. Okay, so I don't know what it is. He's got an OLED. He's looked at his... Oh, it's supposed to be hours. That's supposed to be hours, not house. Of use. I figured out what the hell I wrote.
He looked out at hours of use on this OLED, and they're almost exactly 2,000 hours per year. So if the laser light engine lasts 20,000 hours, like they claim, he'd get a decade out of it, and he'd be fine with that. Also, didn't JVC the lasers can be replaced on their projectors? Any word on how much that would cost? They say that there is no reason why they couldn't be replaced, but there's no indication of how they could be replaced.
When they announced it, they were like, they are noodling. they basically want to be able to offer a way to replace the laser light engine, but I haven't heard any further details on that, and I kind of suspect I have my suspicions it isn't going to happen because they're like, hey, just buy a whole new projector.
Yes. So 10 years, right?
Yeah. So we were sort of making a couple of assumptions. We're like, it's a living room. It's probably not going to be blacked out. So you're not going to reap any benefits from deeper black levels than what the NP5 can deliver. We were saying, hey, he was like, I might want to keep this thing for 10 years and I want a game on it. We're like, just get the one where you can replace the lamps. And it's so much less expensive that you can literally buy a new lamp every year. I'm not really seeing a compelling reason to move you away from that MP5, to be completely honest. It's not that the lasers look tremendously better. It's just they're lasers and they use a little bit less power. I guess that's one thing. But it's not that they look tremendously better than the lamp. And if you're willing to replace that lamp quite frequently, that can be the superior looking thing. The black level differences, it's like, yeah, between the NP5 and the NZ7, there's essentially nothing in the black level difference. So you would be looking at going $9,000 more expensive to get the NZ8. I'm just like, look, if $9,000 is no big deal to you, the NZ8 in a blacked out room is the superior projector. I'll put it that way. I don't think it's worth $9,000. I still kind of like, for your usage, the convenience of the NP5, and I definitely like the lower price. I'll just put it that way.
Okay. So he's looked around. If he goes refurbished or used, there are the older lamp-based NZ7 units available at prices.
That's going back to generation.
Sorry.
Right. On these ones, yeah.
Available at prices similar to a brand new NP5. He does want the latest and greatest for gaming, but would the image quality for movies be of an NX7 be a big step up in a fully blacked out room? He's thinking he might find a way to continue using a C9 OLED for gaming and then dedicate the projector to movies. I mean, I understand that you want the latest and greatest for gaming.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you get it with the NP5. You get 4K 120 support with that sucker.
Yeah. I don't know.
I think he's like, okay, honestly, you are into, because he's never had a projector before. This isn't I've got a projector and I want an upgrade. He's like, you're in your head. You're in your head worrying about this stuff. I will assure you two things. A, none of the JVC projectors, no matter how expensive you go, have the same black level as your OLED.
That's the thing that I just cannot. I just, when you first get a projector, and we've seen this happen on this podcast a number of times, especially people who have owned plasmas or OLEDs are like, it's not black. I'm like, I know, but you said it had good black levels. It does, but they're not as good as my OLED.
Yeah.
I didn't
compared
say that.
To all
I said
other
they were
projectors.
compared to other projectors. They are very good, and I don't think that. I think what you're thinking is that if you spend enough money on a projector, it will look the same as your OLED, and that is not the case.
Right.
Go to any movie theater, see how black the screen looks. I mean,
it's not the pure black of your OLED, but the other side of it is the difference from NP5 to NX7. NX7 is pretty much the same as NZ8. They are comparable in their black levels. This is a difference you can measure if you actually paint your entire living room pitch black. If you had them side by side, it is visible, but you are not going to have them side by side. I don't think you are actually going to paint all of your living room completely black. I think you're going to end up with gray. Gray is great, okay?
Yes.
Putting it all together, I'm like, the difference just isn't great enough that you should spend $9,000 more or take a step back on the 4K 120 support when the price is going to be the same. Because if you go NX7 or NP5, the price is going to be approximately the same. I'm pretty bullish on you getting that MP5. For this setup, I think it's the right choice, and I'll leave it there, to be honest. Yeah, because you're gonna drive yourself crazy otherwise.
I do. I really. So my general thought is, for most people, they get these gaming features that they say they're going to use. They either use them and don't really get any real benefit from it that they actually notice, or they don't actually ever use them, and then they just have them to have them. It's like, I don't know, having a turbo boost that you never use or something like that in your car. And for you, I think that you're trying to get these super duper deep black levels, and we're talking about degrees of difference.
That's what it is.
And you're thinking it is like the MP5 will be, light, a dark gray screen, but the other ones will be, if I spend the $9,000 extra, I'll get like this black.
No,
this black
MP5
black.
is really, really good. It's better than any other projector bar other JVCs. And then when you're going to the other JVCs, it's measurable side by side in a Batcave room. It is visible, but it's not going to be side by side. You're going to have the one projector in your room, and it's going to be really good. So I hope we can put your mind a little at ease there.
So he hadn't really looked into projection screens too much before all this, so he appreciated it when we pointed out how there are basically standard screen sizes available, with 135 or 137 inches being common. Now that he's had a look, it seems as though 150 inches is the next standard size up. We talked about how that's pushing it for JVC projectors when it comes to HDR, correct?
Correct. Yes.
He keeps thinking that he wants to go as big as he possibly can. He didn't want an acoustically transparent screen at first, and we already worked out the throw distance that will give the JVC projector enough room to throw a 140-inch image, which happens to fit nicely in the sort of room size that they've come across while house hunting. But should he be prioritizing going for this 150-inch screen size and finding a room large enough that will accommodate the throw distance, and also let him install an acoustically transparent screen with the speakers behind it? My dude, the cart is so far behind the cart is so far before the horse right now. The horse can't even see the cart. The cart is over the horizon.
To put it the other way, I just bought an 83-inch TV. Now what house should I buy for this TV? That's right. That doesn't make sense. That's completely bad.
You know what this reminds me of? That Kohler commercial when somebody walks into like the architect's office and slaps down a Kohler faucet and says, "Build a house around this." Right. It's like, it was a very cool commercial, and I liked the sort of message it sent. But it's ludicrous, and what you're talking about right now is very, very silly.
Here's what:
find a house, my dude. Yes. They are hard to find these days. You're not going to have the kind of options that you're thinking you're going to have, unless you literally have infinite money. In which case, why are you even talking to us?
And here's what might very well happen: you find a house, you like everything about that house. It's got a living room that works, or a basement room that works for the theater. It's a little bit smaller than some of the ones you've been looking at. You're like, you know what? All I can fit in here for the seating distance I'm going to have is 110 inches.
The humanity.
That's fine. We're worried about the field of view, not the screen size. By no means should you decide on 150 inches first and then try to buy your house around it. That makes... Yeah. If you go smaller, so much the better. That is less expensive. HDR
just like
is even
with
brighter.
the small subwoofers. I'm like, you've hit the lottery. Right. You got the small room. You can pressurize it easily with very small, relatively inexpensive subwoofers. You can buy a smaller screen that's going to be less. You're going to be able to sit close. I mean, my dude, don't worry. Buy the house.
Yes.
Then get back to us.
That's right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, if he goes through the effort of blacking out the room with all black walls, does the shade of the couch matter? Yes, it's got to be black. Everything has to be black.
Yeah.
You can only wear black clothes in here.
That's right.
You must put black face paint on, and if you don't have black hair, you must wear a hoodie with the hood pulled up. And get those eye contacts from the supernatural people. Yep. Yeah. So those are black too. We want no reflections. You think I'm being silly? You're being silly. We're both being silly. Look at us being silly together. Right. He says there is a sectional from Axis that they really like and want to purchase since they prefer a couch over individual theater recliners. It comes in medium gray, so would having the couch negate the black walls, or would it be okay? I mean, I wouldn't buy a couch before I bought a house. I'm being honest with you.
Let's make sure it's going to fit. You don't
even know. You're like, it might fit into the basement you want, but it might not go down the stairs. Mm-hmm. Then what are you going to do?
Sectional should. Usually the sectional isn't actually one piece. The whole idea of being a sectional is that it comes apart. But yeah, I mean, this is another one where I'm just like, this is supposed to be a living room. And it's like, I think he's so worried about missing out on the very best that I think you've lost a little bit of the forest for the trees, right?
Yeah.
It's like what we're suggesting to you is going to be really, really good. It's going to be better than anything you've seen before in a home projection setup, because like you said, the last time you saw it, he wasn't impressed at all. And it's like, no,
right.
This is going to be really, really good. Get the house first. That matters so much more. If we need to change some details after you have the house, we can. But yeah, I'm not worried about if this is the gray couch that you like. Yes, let's use it. The NP5 is cheaper and does all the things you want. Let's do that. The screen size being smaller is beneficial in so many ways. Let's keep sane about this, and believe me, you're probably going to need to put more money into that HVAC than you've budgeted for, and all of this will be to your benefit.
Right. So, and I hate to say this, but you're making a lot of plans here for this house, this theoretical house that you're going to buy, and you may end up, like we've said, with a house that is perfect in every way except for the theater room isn't exactly what you expected it to be. In which case, it may be such that you're like, I literally can't. The throw distance for the JVCs don't work in here. Like I can't put it in here.
Yeah.
Now what do I do?
Yeah.
So that's why doing this research is great, and the thought process is great, and I'm the same way. I'd be doing the same thing. But you must find the house and the room and then come back to us on it. So could we explain again why we aren't a big fan of butt kickers? He's been to a Dolby Cinema that had butt kicker brand tactile transducers installed in the seats, and he liked them. So he's considering adding a few to that Axis sectional couch, but is there a practical reason to avoid them? There is a lot of practical reasons to avoid them, I think, but there's no real reason that doesn't involve me thinking that they're too much trouble for too little benefit. So the problem with tactile transducers, not butt kickers in particular, just tactile transducers, is that they want to have an unaltered base signal sent to them.
That's really what they need. They can't. They can take a signal that's been EQ'd, but that's not going to come out correct. You're going to maybe bottom them out if there's been a boost applied by the EQ, or maybe not shake you the way they want if there's been a cut applied in the EQ. So yeah.
If you think about it this way, the base that's going to the butt kicker or the tactile transducer, it needs to be un-EQ'd because it's supposed to. It doesn't. It is. The room is irrelevant in that case. What the room does to the base is irrelevant in that case, because what it's doing is it's shaking you based on how much you would be shaken, your couch would shake in an open field. Yeah, with the
tactile
with
transducer
the subwoofer.
Doesn't have sound wave reflections off of the walls of your room.
Right. So what happens is your room, unfortunately, does affect the sound that's in the room. So therefore, when the bass is bouncing around the room, your room correction and your room treatments and everything else are trying to make it so that room, that bass sounds natural to you. So it EQs it to change the frequency, how loud some frequencies are, in order to make it sound more convincing and more realistic to you. Those changes, if they're fed, like Rob said, if they're fed to the butt kicker, can damage the butt kicker or make it sound or feel unrealistic. So in order to get it to work properly, you technically need two bass signals. So to do it properly, what you would do is you would run your Odyssey. So you would run your Odyssey. You would turn Odyssey off and measure your bass, and then turn Odyssey back on and measure your bass, and then make an inverse wave, basically, or inverse calibration, so that it would undo everything Odyssey does. Then you would put a mini DSP between the butt kickers and your receiver in order to undo what Odyssey did, and so that the butt kickers get the even flat response that it is expecting. And then it shakes your couch, hopefully in a way that lines up with what you're actually hearing.
Sure.
So
my main thing is that the tactile transducer or the butt kicker, I'm not against them. And I probably like them a little bit more than Tom does. If I'm going to do it, it is going to be Butt Kicker brand. That's the only ones I've liked where you can set them subtle enough that they actually sort of mimic the way real sound feels to a pretty good degree versus just shaking you, almost like a little bit indiscriminately of the frequency. I don't want just a shaker. I definitely want one that changes the way it feels based on what frequency it's producing. And the butt kickers do that best. I will also take that a step further and go, the only butt kicker model I like is the full-size butt kicker LFE. I don't like the little butt kicker minis. I don't think they have that wonderful subtlety that the full-size butt kicker LFE can do. So if you were going to use it with your sectional couch, I would put the sectional couch on a platform and I would attach a full-size butt kicker LFE to that same platform, and I would do it that way as opposed to securing a mini butt kicker to each part of the sectional or something like that. I would do the single one that moves the entire platform under it. But you're going to all this effort in your, at least in your plans, to enclose your room. Yeah. And you were the one who wanted completely massive overkill subwoofers. It is not like a full-size Dolby Cinema. And the full-size Dolby Cinema, as crazy powerful as the subwoofers they have in there are, they're augmenting that because just the sheer size of the room and the seats that they're using, you can sort of use that augmentation by the butt kickers. In your room, enclosed with the types of subwoofers that you want to have, you're going to have all the tactile feel that you need and want from the sound waves alone. And Tom and I prefer that because that's what the signal is. It's a sound wave signal. We don't need to augment it with a thing physically shaking you. You're getting that the way you were supposed to get it, which is from the sound waves themselves. So we're like, if you can do what you want to do, then let's just do that. And we don't need the complication of the butt kickers. I'm fine with going, when we can't do that, the butt kickers can be a nice way to augment the bass and get some of that tactility back. I like that they can be subtle. That's what I want. Even though they're probably one of the largest physical tactile transducers that consumers buy, they're one of the most subtle. And that's what I like about it.
Thing to remember too is on this podcast I often rail against them, but I have recommended them before. And the reasons I've recommended them are for exactly what Rob just said, which is it is in a room where you cannot pressurize it and cannot get the subwoofers to shake the couch the way that the subwoofers can in fact shake couches. So instead you shake it with the tactile transducer. So I'm not going to say that you can't do this. I'm saying that you won't, if you do everything that you're planning on doing, you won't need to, number one. And if you're going to do this, do it after. Like, do the...
Yeah, that's not the priority.
Yeah. After everything's done and you get your home theater set up and stuff, if you turn everything up to reference level or near reference level or as loud as you want it to be, and it's still not shaking the couch enough for you, then we can talk about it. This is an aftermarket thing that we can talk about later. It does not have to be planned for now. Tactile.
Looking for the article on AV Gadgets, I'm sure, right?
I am exactly doing that. And I couldn't spell tactile for some reason correctly while I was talking at the same time. Boom. There it is.
So we should be able to Ireland. Martin. We should be able to do Martins if we're somehow quick. We're definitely not going to do Maxes this week. Sorry, Max, you'll be first up next week. But yeah, we might get to a few below Maxes, but let's see what we have for Martin first.
Martin has an enclosed room with roughly 14 by 15 by 7. So it's, not that big.
Not huge.
And he sits about 9 feet from his front speakers. He's got a Denon X3600H powering Q acoustic speaker, a Q acoustic speaker setup, including a pair of 3050 towers, 3090 center, 3010 surrounds. It seems like they could have gotten rid of the 30 and just left the rest of the numbers, but whatever. He's also got a pair of mono-price monolith 10-inch THX subs, which he bought based on recommendations, and he says he's very happy with those. Mm-hmm. He would say that he is not unhappy with his Q acoustic speakers, but he wants to switch from towers to bookshelf front, left, and right speakers, and he sees this as an opportunity to try something different. For his taste, he finds the Q acoustic speakers a bit lacking in detail on the top end, and even though he's sitting quite close and his room isn't huge, he has to crank the volume quite high to get the music sounding good. So those are improvements he's looking for. He started watching YouTube reviews of speakers, and it's become a little overwhelming. He's fallen down the rabbit hole with prices going up and up and up and up and up. He's put together a list of speakers that are available to purchase where he lives and fall within this budget. Can we narrow it down for him or recommend an obvious winner? So this is what he's got. I'm not going to put the prices on here. These go from low to high. Okay. So ELAC Debut, Monitor Audio Bronze, Wharfdale Diamond, or Evo. So those are both in there, but the Evos are way more expensive. Dolly Oberon's, Klipsch RP, bunch of things, but basically
Klipsch Reference Premiere.
Stuff. Yeah, Reference Premiere. Focal Cora, Aperion Novus, and SVS Prime Bookshelf.
Which where he is, SVS ends up being the most expensive because being in Ireland, there's additional costs shipping going on over there.
And stuff like that. So as much as I like SVS, they're not going to win this competition. I'll just let you know that right now, right off the bat. So the ELAC debuts are certainly a very nice entry-level speaker that I would have no problems recommending to people.
But if your whole thing is I don't want any high-frequency roll-off and I want them to be more sensitive, that like the ELACs and the Q Acoustics are really good contemporaries of one another. Right. They're the type where mixing and matching them would probably go really well without very much of a timbre mismatch at all. So I don't really think that's where you want to go, right? The things he described as wanting to change, I'm like, the ELAC debuts do the same things in those regard as the Q Acoustics. So I wouldn't point you towards those, to be honest. I will say right away the Focal jumped out at me. I'm like,
that's the problem is that they're very close to the top. So the cheapest thing on here is 280 euros
a pair,
and the Focal and the SVS Prime bookshelves are 650.
Right.
Just a lot. And the Focal Coras are like 590. So those are the ones that jumped out at me as well. If they're in your price range, these are probably the obvious winners.
Like the thing is, to me, if he's saying these are available in his area, these are the ones he would consider for his budget, and he just doesn't want to be overrun, because this is a lot of choices. Trying to find all of these available, of these available for demo or for audition, that's a lot. I'm thinking if we narrow this down to 2 or 3, now you can audition those. Either you can find a store where you can demo them, or maybe they'll be nice enough to let you bring 2 of these pairs home and actually compare, which ideally you would do. Ideally, you'd whittle it down to like 2 or 3 and bring them home and try them out. So I'm like, the Focal Cora, I would definitely put on that list. I will say the Monitor Audio Bronze I have not heard, but people have been raving about them, and the measurements of them are really good. So when people are raving about them and the measurements are really good, I'm like, they're probably worth a try, and they're closer to the low end of your price range. So I'm like, okay, we get one that's closer to the low end and has a lot of rave reviews and really good measurements in those Monitor Audio Bronze. We get one that I know I would swear by, which are the Focal Coras, and they're closer to the top range. I'm like, maybe we put one in the middle, maybe those dollies, because I know Tom likes the dollies. So I
haven't heard the Oberons though. Okay, so I mean, but generally speaking, I have been impressed with the dollies I have heard. I have not heard Wharfdale, and I don't know much about them. So I would say this. I agree with what you've said. The Monitor Audio were the second ones. I would strike from this list the SVS Primes. I don't think they're worth that price. I would probably not really consider the Klipsch at the prices that they're at here, because they actually... Well,
plus he said he wants, really linear now and all that.
So the Klipsch are gone from here. Appearance, okay. I don't know that the Novus is worth being way up here at the same price as the Focal.
It's because they're having to come in from North America, and he's an island, whereas Focal is French and they're more available in Europe in general.
And we've gotten rid of the ELACs already. Yeah. So Monitor Audio, and then what's left is Monitor, Wharfdale, Dolly, and Focal. Right. You tell me which of the Wharfdale and the Dollies that you think that sound better. I want to know what you think about that. And I would, and then put those 3. Those would be the 3 I would take a look at. Whatever wins between Wharfdale and Dolly, if you can find one store that has them both.
Yeah.
And then the Monitor and the Focals.
Yeah.
And I would highly recommend that you go in there and try to leave emotion out of it as much as possible, because the Focals may sound very, very good, and the Monitor Audios may sound also pretty good. And you need to look at those true price points, which the monitors are almost half.
That's right. Which is part of the
you're
reason
gonna
people
have
are
to,
raving about them.
Yeah, you're going to have to really convince me that those monitors are, half as good as the focals.
There are also aesthetics, and that is not nothing. If you're like, these ones are more expensive, but man, I love the way they look compared to the others. Like that. Don't completely discount that either. So that's worth it. But yeah, I think we've at least narrowed it down a little bit to where it's manageable. We've got like I will say this: if it's Rob buying speakers and I don't have any time, I'm just like, I need to go out there and get a pair of speakers that I know I'm going to love. For me, it would be the focals, but that doesn't mean if you've got a little bit of time and ability to demo or audition, we've narrowed it down to a 3, 4 at the most, because we're just not familiar enough with the Wharfdales to say
I would not like the Period and the SVS and the Klipsch. I don't think those price points make any sense. They make sense over here, but they don't make sense where you are. So, we're down to 2 minutes left on my clock.
That's going to be it. That's going to be it for this week. Unusually short for me to be the one cutting us off. But yeah, Max he's got a whole bunch of questions, and that's the main one. We do have other ones that I put on the list, Ryan and Joseph and Jay. Thankfully, I actually already gave them responses via email, so they're not left hanging, but it's just fun stuff to have on the podcast, and they're pretty short questions. So don't feel too bad. We'll be all right. The main one is Max. So we've got a whole bunch to get to with him next week starting up. But be first up. That's all right.
All right. If you want to be listener of the week next week, leave a review on Touch of Pain. Hopefully, an honest one would be nice, but it would also be nice if it was honest and also positive. So, Touch of Pain is up on Amazon. We'll put the link in the show notes. It's always there, anyways. But just want to mention that. And if you want to get your question answered on this podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions, email us at question@avrant.com. We want to thank Ryan and Aras for going to avrant.com and click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link and leaving us a PayPal donation, as well as our 139 patrons over at patreon.com, including Martin.
Yes, indeed. Ryan and Aras, thank you so much for the PayPal donations. Martin, thank you for being one of our 139 patrons over at patreon.com/AVRant podcast, which is the place to go to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation.
And we want to thank those who thanked us for keeping the podcast going. Notes of gratitude from Aras, Dale, David, Ryan, Martin, Karl, Jay, Greg, and Max.
Yes, indeed. Aras, Dale, David, Ryan, Martin, Karl, Jay, Greg, and Max. Thank you all very much for the notes of gratitude to us. The notes of encouragement are certainly appreciated. Big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions. We also want to thank Gurinder and Mark, who, they were a part of the notes of gratitude as well. But we know they listened all the way to the very end because, fun stuff from them.
That's right. For AVRant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.